This episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast is brought to you by our Medical Design and Outsourcing magazine. We'll talk about many of the great articles we have in this month's issue. Go to medicaldesignandoutsourcing.com to download that issue. And please check back often for great news and analysis on the medtech industry. Go to medicaldesignandoutsourcing.com. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Welcome back to the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast. This is Tom Salemi, and I'm being joined by the editorial team of MassDevice and Medical Design and Outsourcing. You're going to hear one actually three familiar voices, one more familiar voice, Chris Newmarker. You're back.
Good to be here.
And you're joined by your future placement, Sean Woolley and Danielle Kirsch.
That's right.
Sean, welcome back. And Danielle Kirsch, have you made your way to a Trader Joe's yet? Once. And was it a comfortable, leisurely fashion, or did you rush through COVID style?
Nope, just did a whole, in and out, 10 minutes, know exactly where I need to go, what I need.
We will get there. We will get to that point where you can spend the entire afternoon in Trader Joe's.
They'll have cookie samples again. on top of barrels. I mean, it'll be great. It'll be a blast.
I do miss the samples. I still look for them too. It's like, what? Oh yeah, right. We don't do that anymore.
They put them right by the register too. It was like, you couldn't get out of there without getting a cookie. It's just, yeah.
Well, we're not here to talk about samples. We're here to talk about many, many things MedTech, including our Women in MedTech issue, our Medical Design and Outsourcing magazine. The entire edition is focused on several important and influential women who are leaders in the MedTech industry. Danielle, you worked on this effort with Nancy Crotty, the managing editor of Medical Design and Outsourcing, who unfortunately can't be on the call today. Just talk a bit about a little bit about the issue, what folks can look forward to as this arrives in their office, but they can also find it an electronic version, which we'll all share on social media.
Yeah, so the Women in MedTech issue is very focused on these women executives that are in the industry, from some of the bigger OEMs, Medtronic, Stryker, Smith & Nephew. And then also I like to focus on women innovators or women who are starting their own medtech companies because they found an issue and they wanted to address it. So, some of the things that I've learned this year, we heard from Patty Post, who, as a mother of three, saw a need for at-home strep tests. So she wanted to make an at-home strep test, and that's what she's doing right now. And then another woman wanted to start a company where she addressed the swelling that happens after abdominal surgery because she was an abdominal surgeon. She saw that was an issue. So those are some of the things that I like to focus on, is just these women that find an issue and then fix it.
And we'll be hearing from many folks. I'll be talking with Patty Post a little bit later for our opening keynote conversation. But this collection of stories gives you, I think, a great perspective and a great opportunity to take a hard look at the medtech industry. Any important takeaways that you want to share?
Some of the things that I've found in my research of some of the 100 biggest medical device companies in the world is that only 20% of their executive roles are held by women. And that's just for 2020. In 2019, it was 18%. So it's up a little more, but it still needs work. And in those companies, women only hold 19% of the positions within that company. So there's only 19% composition of women in executive roles. And last year it was 15. So it is trending more toward parity, but we still have a long way to go.
When you think that 50% of the population is women and only a fifth of the top executives in our industry are women, that's it's a big difference right now. And I recall, Danielle, how many, because out of the 100 largest medical device companies in the world, how many have CEOs that are women?
Only 5 companies have female CEOs, and that would be Silk Road Medical, Paul Hartman, GN Hearing, Insulet, and B. Braun.
Wow, just 5. So did you get any sense, are things getting better? Are we advancing in the industry?
I think the data can kind of show that it's getting better. And I know last year when I data. I had one company in particular, not naming names, but they reached out to me and said, hey, we have women in executive roles. Why didn't you include us? And because we use the information that is like publicly available on their website, they came back and said, well, you've really made us think about how we present ourselves as a company. And I want to thank you for that. So we're going to keep this in mind moving forward. So I think the more we do stuff like that, it just sometimes you just need the push.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. We're making a difference, darn it.
That's fantastic. I think that was the theme of a lot of interviews I listened to, and we're going to draw some of the audio from that. If they're not pushing actively, they're pushing through the efforts that they're making. And before we get into that recorded audio, we're introducing a new feature to the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast. It's called the 2-Minute Detox. This is an opportunity for companies of every kind, startups, service providers, whatever your story is, whatever you're doing in MedTech, we want to give you a platform to share it with the world. So it's an opportunity to present your story in 2-minute segments within the podcast, and we'll follow it up each week so you'll have the opportunity to hit a broader audience. I won't give you any more details. I'll play the audio now, but this is a great opportunity for more folks and more voices to find their way in the podcast. Welcome to our new podcast feature, the 2-Minute Detox. Get it? DeviceTalks Detox. Anyway, we created this segment to give MedTech companies the opportunity to use our platform to tell their own stories in short 2-minute chapters. We'll run an installment in each of our 4 episodes coming up so we can bring you even more important MedTech stories in this podcast. This is sponsored content, but it's important content. I know you'll enjoy it. I'm thrilled that our first detoxer is Jennifer Freed, the CEO of Explorer Surgical. In Chapter 1, Jennifer will tell us what Explorer Surgical is.
Explorer is a digital playbook for the operating room that allows med device companies to offer consistency to the providers that are using their product. And there are 3 key pillars of our software product. The first part is a workflow. So we develop step-specific and role-specific best practices with our med device customers to allow HCPs to see that specific content visually in the room during a case and follow this best practices live. The second pillar of our product is data capture. So within our system, you're able to easily capture data, whether that is time-based data, how long people are spending on each step of the case, performance-based data, or other types of insights into what's actually happening in the room. And the third pillar of our system, which has picked up tremendously in interest in this era of COVID, is HIPAA-compliant audio video. Pre-COVID, the vast majority of our customers were using our playbook and our data capture offerings in the room, and when you have a rep or clinical specialist that's there on site. Now, through Explorer, you're able to use it in person, remotely, or in a hybrid model, as we're seeing so many of our customers do, where you may have one local rep on site, but your clinical specialist or other team members aren't able to attend the case in person.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that first segment of the 2-Minute Detox. Jennifer Freed is terrific. We'll hear more from her in coming episodes. If you're interested in telling your story on this podcast, just find me on LinkedIn and I'll put you in touch with the right folks. Now I want to introduce our opening keynote. I had an opportunity to have a very quick conversation with one of our subjects in the Medical Design and Outsourcing magazine. Danielle Kirsch actually spoke with Patty Post. Patty is the CEO of Checkable Medical. Patty and I have known each other for a few years, and it was great to see her move from her career in medtech and sales into being the CEO of her own company. So I talked to her about that transition. Let's listen. This opening keynote conversation is brought to you by our DeviceTalks Tuesdays digital speaker series. Normally, we'll meet every 4 p.m. on Tuesday to hear from MedTech's leaders. But this coming Tuesday on November 3rd, we will not be holding a DeviceTalks Tuesdays. It is Election Day. We remind you to please vote. Now let's hear from our keynote conversation. Well, Patty Post, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's really great to be here, Tom.
It's great to have you here. We've known each other for a few years, and this is an exciting development for you. I remember being part of your earlier conversations where you were kind of floating an idea past some people, and I was fortunate to be one of the people you were sort of just mentioning this idea, and just to see that little conversation turn into a thriving startup is exciting. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was 9 months that I called around to people, and you were actually probably on my top 10, maybe 5 even.
Oh my gosh. Oh my.
I remember that conversation. I was walking in downtown Minneapolis on like a break walk. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to call Tom and ask him about this idea.
That's awesome. Well, I'm flattered again. Thank you. Doubly flattered now. Well, that's kind of what I want to talk about. Just we all have these moments in life where we are wondering whether we should take that leap. I know in your situation, you had a job. The salary was important. It was not nothing to walk away from it, but you did. Like what was that point, that tipping point where you said, I got to do this? What was that like? And how did you make that decision?
Well, I took the 9 months to talk to physicians, talk to industry folks, talk to regulators, and really understand if this is something that's doable before. So I was at the edge of the cliff looking over for a long time. Mm-hmm. But I honestly, it was like a burning desire inside of me that I couldn't muffle it at all. And it would
couldn't let it go.
I couldn't let it go. I'd wake up in the middle of the night. It's the only thing that I wanted to talk about. I'm sure my family and friends were so annoyed with me, but I couldn't put it down. And as I was working for a firm, and I was working on other people's companies, and I saw them doing things that, one, it wasn't that exciting of product. And it was almost like, oh, let's do a Gen 4 and a color change, or let's have a new rolling cart. It's like, oh, this is so boring. I'm doing something that I have something to actually change people's lives, and I don't see anyone else doing it. Mm-hmm. Why don't I just do it? So I went to the edge of the cliff and I leaped. I never looked back.
You leap. That's awesome. Let's talk about what it is that Checkable does. Tell us a little bit about Checkable.
Sure. So what we're doing is we're using lateral flow diagnostics and bringing them through the clinical trial process for over-the-counter approval. So they can be used as a wellness benefit for self-insured employers or payers, and then ultimately be on retail shelves. And so anyone that has a symptom can go to a store or go to Amazon and have it delivered to their house, so they don't have to sit around and wait and wonder if they have a common infectious disease that is spreadable. So we're starting with the indication of strep throat. And we have paired it with a digital platform. And the digital platform is super important because collecting a sample isn't as easy as, breathing or, taking a tissue and rubbing your surface. We're collecting a pharyngeal sample, or, moving on to other indications. It will be a training platform that will show you how to collect the sample, how to run the test, and then we will take an image of a positive or negative. And if it's positive, we'll connect you with one of our telemedicine providers. So we're a digital health platform and we're a telemedicine platform.
Wow.
So we have essentially 3 products. COVID changed that a little bit. We actually took on a rapid antibody test, and we are just finishing our clinical trial for emergency use authorization of a rapid antibody test for at-home use. And that will be paired with our digital platform and telemedicine platform ultimately. Mm-hmm. So we are a 4-product company now.
That's outstanding. And I want to talk a bit about the process that you've gone through as a CEO. You reached out to me probably about 2 months ago. I had a connection to someone you wanted to connect with, and my connection was through someone else. So I checked with my connection to see if I can get that connection for you. And anyway, I got back to you and said, sorry, Patty, I can't get that for you. And I was so impressed that you emailed back. You're like, oh, that's fine. I'm already talking to the guy. It's like, you just completely didn't wait for me. You just kind of found another way to go around. And I think that's the sign of a good CEO. What has the past 9 months been for you personally, I guess, and professionally? More professionally than personally, but how have you grown? What have you learned, and how have you learned it? Mm-hmm.
Well, I've been in sales my entire career, so I am very fortunate to have many experiences where I had to be extremely bold and extremely confident in just going after it when I have the end in mind and I know what that is that I want. I have no problem going after it, and I'm very brave in that. Where I have lacked is my confidence to lead. And because there are so many different chairs to fill in the company, from regulatory to quality to clinical to legal, really across the gamut. If you think of there's 12 different specialties, even that telemedicine piece and security. And so it's been the confidence that I have lacked in, this year. And I am finding my way in through mentors and through processes that allow me to really understand the business, and that allowed me to lead from behind. And before, I think I was leading in front and being like, oh, I have to be this cheerleader and I have to bring everyone together. And I don't have to do that. And I also don't have to have a number two that I have to rely on. I struggled with that.
A number two person or number two plan?
A number two person.
Number two person.
Yeah. And I just always looked at it as, oh, they've done it before, so they must know. And it comes to find out that no one knows my business better than me. Like, it sounds crazy, but I woke up one day, I'm like, why do I keep relying on these other people? They're doing it wrong. Because in my mind, I already have it made up, but I was thinking they knew better. And you could tell that, now that I have a lot of relationships like you and I, and they say, I've seen a change. I see a change in how you communicate, how you're selling the company. And so I'm proud of myself for that, because hard things have come out of that, like hard conversations with myself. But it's been all for the good. And I have a lot of room to grow. I'm not saying by any means I figured it out.
And that's outstanding. No, I think this past year has been an opportunity for a lot of us to grow quickly. And similar to you, I've in the past, I think I've had an idea and I just kind of wanted to get people to buy into it. We'd all move forward as a group, and then they weren't doing that. And I'd be like, yeah, I still think it's right. I'm just going to move forward. You guys catch up with me. And there's a point where you kind of have to do that. You have to say, like, this is my decision to make. I'm making the decision. I believe it's right. And you move forward. Yeah. So that completely resonates with me. I don't usually ask this, but we had a little conversation before I pushed record. Any books you're reading recently that sound interesting? You did mention one that I liked a lot.
Yeah. So the book is The Obstacle is the Way.
Yep.
And it is phenomenal. The stories that they have about, there are really only two ways that we can go. You can, if you have something that's a barrier, you can go cry in the corner and feel sorry for yourself, and you're going to give up ultimately. Or when you figure it out and you make do with nothing, and that's, I keep saying I make do with nothing, because whether that is a lack of funds or a lack of team, if you don't have, a subject matter expert there, you make do with that. And a lot of creativity comes out of that. And I think even to the company, because we were running up against an early prototype that wasn't working out, and it was going to end up being, the cogs were way too high. And it ended up that we were able to, and we didn't have enough money to hire like a huge team. It was like a $600,000 bill that came in, or a quote. And we just figured it out ourselves. We just were like, okay, let's go out in the market and see what other people are doing. And that's how I look at the obstacle is the way. Is if it's not going the way that you want, then you got to figure it out. And that's one of my mottos is always, everything is figure outable. We're not like, don't be running around with your hair on fire. Like, it's going to be okay.
That's great. Yeah. So that's a t-shirt right there.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great to reconnect. I'm very happy for you, and can't wait to see what Checkable will become.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's really great to catch up. I'm glad that you and your family are doing well too.
Thanks again to Patty Post for joining us on the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast. Now, let's open those pages and look at some of those interviews inside. Sean, you had the opportunity to interview a couple of very impressive people, Katie Syzman of Edwards and Naomi Murray of Stryker. Let's talk about Katie Syzman first. What was the focus of your article or about her?
She came up through Medtronic. She was at Medtronic for over 2 decades, an accounting background. And within the last, I believe it was 6 years ago, she switched over to Edwards Lifesciences to run their critical care business. So we kind of delved into what Edwards is doing in that space, a lot of AI, algorithms, things like that for patient monitoring to basically take it out of the physician's hands and allow for more innovation in that space. And talked about how she's trying to bring that business forward. Obviously, Edwards is such a big player in the TAVR space that critical care might take the backseat to that, but we discussed what she's doing to bring critical care to the fore. Other than that, how she was tagged by their CEO as someone to help run an employee resource group for women at Edwards. And yeah, how she's kind of helping women move forward in the space too.
That was E.Now, right? Edwards Network of Women, I believe.
She's also worked to encourage elementary school, middle school age girls to get into STEM as well. So she's trying to help the younger generation move towards that too.
That's great. Yeah, I think she said E.Now had grown from 200 women to 2,700 or so women. So, but in this comment from that interview, though, we'll focus on critical care and artificial intelligence. So let's hear this portion of that interview.
As the general manager of the critical care business at Edwards, we are focused on critical care monitoring technologies. And so we monitor patients that are critically ill, whether they're in the ICU or in high-risk surgical situations. So high-risk surgeries that may be more than three hours long, we will be monitoring the patients, and we do hemodynamic monitoring. And so about a third of our business is focused on the ICU, and so we've been very involved in treating COVID-19 patients and monitoring these patients to try to help them to get better. And then about half of our business is in monitoring high-risk surgeries. And in that area, we're doing something called smart recovery, where we're applying artificial intelligence and predictive algorithms to help clinicians make better decisions and kind of prevent issues from happening for patients.
Given that Edwards is such a big player in the valve space, my grandfather a year ago had a Sapien implanted. It's just...
You're kidding! That's fantastic. Wow.
It's everywhere. Being in a different space at the same company, what are you trying to do to bring critical care forward?
So critical care is almost 20% of Edwards revenues, and we're really focused on kind of being that window to digital health for Edwards. So if you think about like when a patient gets a valve, they need to be monitored, and over time you can envision there's less and less invasive ways to monitor patients and help to reduce the length of stay and reduce complications that patients would have, even whether it's for their valve surgeries. And so we try to be linked as much to the valve businesses and enable, patients to recover faster on the valve side of the business. And then really the platform for us for growing in the future is around smart recovery. So continuing to advance in remote monitoring, in artificial intelligence algorithms to continue to improve advanced monitoring so that we can improve patient care. Okay, we're growing. So you look at critical care, we're growing in the high single digits. So call it, our average growth rate for the last 4 or 5 years has been probably around 7-ish%. And that's pretty, excluding this year, which is the COVID year, obviously. Mm-hmm. But even this year with COVID, we're probably going to be, maybe 0 to negative 5% growth. So still, holding up pretty strong throughout COVID-19. So we look to be, our industry grows at about 3% in terms of overall patient monitoring as a sector. So growing in the high single digits, we're growing almost twice the rate of the industry. And we're doing that by continuing to invest, as I said, in artificial intelligence algorithms and then in remote monitoring in the future.
Is there anything, in terms of that remote monitoring or AI-based technology that we can get excited about coming from Edwards in the future?
Yeah, so, the biggest thing that we have is we were the first company to get an artificial intelligence or a predictive algorithm approved through the FDA in 2018, I believe. So we're in the process, and that algorithm is called hypotension prediction. So it's predicting severe low blood pressure events about 5 to 10 minutes in advance to help clinicians to take action ahead of time to prevent that event from happening. And so that's probably the best example that you could use of our AI technologies, which is the first approved AI algorithm in the monitoring space for hypotension prediction.
All right, well, those are some great comments from Katie Syzman of Edwards. And Sean, you also had the opportunity to speak with Naomi Murray from Stryker. And she's a very impressive person. I know I'd love to get her as a speaker at a future Device Talks. I'm told that she puts on a great presentation about the future of this very interesting space. What was some of the takeaways from your conversation with her? And then we'll run a clip from that interview that you did.
Yeah, it was really interesting to speak with her. She's been working in additive for 20 some odd years. And kind of bringing this into the space, which obviously Stryker is big into orthopedic implants. So, she's working with trying to help, as she described it, help the industry evolve and meet some of the demands that manufacturers are starting to get. She's looking to find ways to reduce costs by using additive, 3D printing, all that, and create more design freedom. And she talks about how she can, going into surgical, orthopedics, robotic surgery, there's all kinds of different applications of the technology. And she definitely speaks very well on the subject. She's, like I said, she's been doing it for 20 years or so she knows her stuff about additives for sure.
Yeah, it's a really interesting subject. I know Stryker I recall they've been kind of a pioneer in 3D printing ortho implants. So it's kind of cool that we can get to hear a bit of her perspective here about it.
That's a great point, Chris. Let's roll the tape of Naomi Murray of Stryker.
I think in additive there are some clear spaces to watch, like just in general in the industry. Additive is a great technology, right? It fills the spot for some really super design freedom that comes out of it. Certainly with our titanium technology, it's a wonderful design opener, design freedom opener to be able to manipulate that porous metal titanium technology. I think that as the additive industry continues to evolve, its customers are going to demand equipment manufacturers to start, having some new capability that maybe they don't have today that does things like when you make an additive part, there's still surface finish, roughness, defects, issues. And I don't mean defect in that the product is defective, but you have a surface finish that sometimes you have to remove to get to your tolerances. We're going to start demanding, that there's more near net shape coming out of that, which should eliminate and reduce, maybe post-processing should reduce cost, which opens up the design freedom even more to being used in more products. The other thing that I'd say is that the space changes rapidly, and we have a lot of technology just in general that is out and about, and we've, I think, just scratched the surface on things like the combination of additive with Stryker's Soma technology or robotic surgery, where you're able to really affect both the design of the implant to be best fit for your population, but also you can really look at your procedure space. I guess I'm going a little bit into orthopedics, but just in general in surgery, looking at your procedure space and some pretty cool changes that you could have that marry design with your procedure through robotics and additive. That's a pretty exciting space, I think, coming up.
All right, it was great to hear from those folks from our Women in MedTech issue of Medical Design and Outsourcing. Once again, the issue is out. It's available. It's available in digital format. We'll all post it on our social media channels. So if you're not connected to us, we'll tell you how to do that at the end. And I know you'll enjoy reading those interviews. All right, well, I should have mentioned this up at the top. I know folks are just probably pulling their hair out of their head wondering, where are Newmarker's newsmakers? Who are the top 5 stories of MassDevice? So we do have Chris Newmarker here with the list of the most powerful and most read about companies in MedTech. But first, we have a new Newmarker's newsmaker sound.
Oh my gosh, Tom, you turned into a werewolf right in front of my eyes.
Yes, let's cue the Thriller music video and we'll scare the bejesus out of everyone on this podcast. Anyway, enough of our hijinks.
It is the season.
It's a fun-sized candy buzz, I'm telling you. I'm holding a fun-sized Snicker. I've already dipped into the candy supply, even though it's not even Halloween yet.
Hey, open up a pumpkin beer now, Tom. We're going to do the Newmarker's newsmakers. So.
Let's not go there.
All right, the number 5, we've got a federal appeals court revived former Abbott employees' age discrimination suit. One of the things they cited was an executive at Abbott supposedly saying that she was told to manage out older workers. So a age discrimination suit against Abbott is alive again after a federal appeals court ruling.
And that was written by Nancy Crotty, who is not with us at the moment. But number 4.
Number 4, we've got Intuitive Surgical is launching a $100 million venture capital fund. So good news for people who want to innovate in the space. We got some Intuitive Surgical money out there now too. So it'll be great.
And that's written by a young man called...
As by Sean Hooley.
All right, way to go.
I think I know that guy. Yeah.
Guys, I'm right here. Let me
Yeah, you're right there. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Sean's right here. Yeah. So we've got it was a good story and well read.
We are going to, just as an aside, we'll have the principles of the venture fund on next week's DeviceTalks Weekly podcast. So people have that to look
that'll
forward
be great.
to. Number three
on the list is that Siemens had a X-ray system gain FDA clearance. This is called the YSO X-Pre, and this includes
the My Exam Companion Intelligent User Interface.
Yes, there we go. Providing proactive guidance to help technologists of any skill level navigate a radiography procedure. So this was another one by Nancy Crotty. Mm-hmm. And then number two on the list. This is just hot off the presses, but Baxter has had there was word out of FDA about an announcement from Baxter about a serious infusion pump recall. Baxter told us actually that that they've been, the alert's been out for months, but it just got posted on FDA's site. FDA just labeled the recall as class 1, its most serious level. But this involves, problems with improper cleaning of Sigma Spectrum infusion pumps, and they are properly cleaned according to the directions. There can be problems around the batteries that cause corrosion. There could be problems with the pumps shutting off. They have reports of 16 serious injuries around this, and the recall involves 306,000 Baxter Sigma Spectrum infusion pumps. So I mean it's a sizable recall, and it's basically telling anybody who's got these things that they should be cleaning them properly and taking some other precautions when using them. That is written by me, but our number one on our list is by none other than Danielle Kirsch. It's our annual roundup of the largest medtech employers and what their employees really think, and we kind of hint at what their employees think by going on to Glassdoor and doing a nice roundup of postings from current and former employees. Like some of the pros, some of the cons. This is part of our Big 100 project that we do every year that examines the largest 100 medical device companies in the world. And Danielle's in charge of this. Danielle, tell people a little bit. This is like a lot of research that you do behind this. Yeah,
Big 100. It's just we go through hundreds of 10Ks, annual reports from publicly traded medical device companies in the world, look at their revenue, their R&D spending, their employee count, and then we just kind of culminate that all together to figure out which companies have made the most money in the last year.
Yeah, but we're in the process now of finalizing our spreadsheet, and we'll be tapping into a few more financial reports next week as they come out, and expect more Big 100 content rolling out in coming weeks on MassDevice and medical design and outsourcing.
That's awesome. I'm in the process of eating a Milky Way bar, which I confused with a Three Musketeers bar. So I had more caramel than I had anticipated, which hindered my ability to podcast.
At least it wasn't a Snickers, Tom. At least it wasn't a Snickers. You like coughing up nuts right now. Oh, you got a Snickers.
I have a Snickers, but I held back.
That thing's the best. It's got a meal. You got protein in it. It's great.
But it had caramel, and I'm like, you can't have that. I'll go with the Milky Way. But it's not a Three Musketeers. Anyway, Danielle looks horrified.
Yes.
All right, well, that's a great wrap-up. Great news. Sorry, I thought you was 11. I'd next like to introduce our closing keynote conversation. I was thrilled to be joined by Vijay Kumar. Vijay Kumar is the managing director at Evercore ISI's Healthcare Services and Technology Research Team. He came on board the podcast to talk about two things in particular. One, I asked him about Thrive Earlier Detection's acquisition by Exact Sciences for over $2 billion. Then we checked in on Boston Scientific, which had its quarterly call this week. Vijay gave us some insights on the call on how Boston Scientific is doing and what we can expect to happen as COVID cases rise. Let's listen. Well, Vijay Kumar, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Tom.
So I know this is a thick in earnings season and you're busy as heck. So I appreciate your taking a few minutes to hit upon some of the bigger or some of the big news of the week, whether it's bigger or not. I guess it's my perception. But one deal I wanted to talk about was Exact Sciences' acquisition of Thrive Earlier Detection. Two interesting companies. I know Exact had an interest in Thrive Earlier, but was this acquisition a surprise?
I don't think the idea that Exact was getting into liquid biopsy in and of itself was a huge surprise. Perhaps what was maybe a little bit surprising was the size of the transaction, right? This is a large one. And, this is slightly different from what Exact does, right? Exact specializes in single cancer screening, to be specific colorectal cancer. And now Thrive is looking at many cancers in a single blood draw. So perhaps, that shift from a single cancer to a multi-cancer in the size of the transaction was, what I would say was surprising. But in and of itself, I think at some point, people expected Exact to get into liquid biopsy, blood-based testing for cancer. So in that sense, it wasn't a surprise.
So is it then? It sounds then as if it's an acquisition that can be integrated rather easily. It's not a completely different line of business or culture or things like that has to be brought in. It's something that Exact can assimilate easily.
There's some elements which can be, right, because your primary customer or end user will be the physician, primary care physician, and if you do have a sales force. Channel presence, a brand awareness amongst general physicians, GPs. I think all of those elements help. So there's certainly channel synergies from that angle. I think the other aspects, which we generally don't talk about when it comes to devices or diagnostics, is all the back end elements, right? In terms of what kind of support personnel do you have, service organization do you have to help GPs navigate the reimbursement landscape, whether these results need to be integrated with EMRs. I think those are all areas where Exact should really speeden up the process. But I think in terms of the actual science itself, right, I mean, that is, these things will march to the tune of science. You can't force, how quick innovation happens. It happens at its own pace. And that is why you'll need this big randomized trials to see what the data will show.
Absolutely, and with it, Thrive would, I imagine, come with a lot of capital. They had raised a few large rounds. I don't believe they would have gone through their most recent one just yet.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's a big boys game, right? I mean, if you're thinking about in general diagnostic landscape, right? We were thinking about in infectious disease testing, right? When we looked at cancer testing, this was more for diagnosing or perhaps informing therapy selection. That's where companies were focused on, and those are all areas where you could perhaps have an LDT pathway. You didn't need to run a large randomized trial. You could still get away with minimal investment from an R&D perspective. But now, when you look at these screening markets, right, you need an FDA approval. You need to go get in front of the USPSTF, and these sample sizes are astronomical, right? You're looking at 50 to 100,000 enrollees in these trials. So that requires a significant amount of capital. And for sure, I think Exact's, balance sheet strength should certainly help, in making those necessary investments.
Interesting. And just more broadly, we saw the Grail Illumina deal earlier this year. What does this acquisition mean for the liquid biopsy space? Is this, is it settling in? We know who the leaders are going to be. How do you view the larger space?
I think we're still a little too early to call who might win. We still don't know what the goalposts are, right? I mean, right? I mean, CMS just came up with NCD guidelines for colorectal cancer screening. Right now, we can try to extrapolate what it means for a pan-cancer, multi-cancer screening. But I think at this stage of the game, we have more questions than answers. I think that's a reasonable conclusion. And look, I mean, I don't think it has to be a one-player take-all kind of market, right? If these markets are really as big, and if you're thinking about screening, it's people like you and me, instead of, going for an annual, perhaps, imaging study, and now we could have a blood draw, right? So the market is big enough to support, multiple players. It doesn't have to be Grail, Illumina versus Exact at this point.
And it certainly is synergistic with a desire of folks not to go into hospitals if they don't need to. And sort of to that point, we had Boston Scientific's quarterly call this week. They had a rough second quarter due to decrease in treatments due to people just through COVID wanting to stay home and not wanting to go to the hospital. This week's report was a bit better. What was your overall assessment of Boston Scientific's Q3 performance?
It was good. I think relative to expectations, it was a respectable print. We've seen results from J&J and Abbott. Boston was right up there, their peers. So it was good to see a clean print from the company. I think some of the questions which people will have is they had some negative headline trial news come out for their Scope 2 trial at TCT a couple of weeks ago. What does it mean to Boston's TAVR franchise for next year? That should be balanced against the positives, right? I think the company is feeling incrementally more positive, bullish around Watchman device for prevention of stroke in AF patients. I think that's going to be an exciting, huge market where Boston has a lead. And they have a ton of, new products coming in within their peripheral business, PI, Alluvia, stent. I think could be interesting. That market is showing signs of reemerging from the depths we saw earlier this year. So there are some positives, there are some questions, but the overall takeaway was this is exactly what we wanted to see, and those numbers were fine.
And they're really looking to they want to really grow aggressively, and I think outgrow their peers. Is that something that you see them then being able to do?
Some of this is just a scale issue, right? So, Boston scale is much smaller than someone like Medtech or Abbott. So I think a smaller product, incremental 50 to 100 million of revenues moves the needle for Boston. With that said, right, there is a cultural element. I think Boston historically has prided themselves in executing on sales. So if the industry growth for the device industry, you're looking at 5 to 6 as the industry average, I don't think it's a stretch to see Boston do about, a point or two above the industry over the next 5 years.
Right. And one point that came up during the call, and it wasn't your question, but it just intrigued me. There was a discussion about M&A and about the fact that companies are going public and that is driving up the costs of potential costs of acquisition, and whether that could slow growth by preventing you from bringing in new high growth products. Is that something, I wasn't quite sure where that came from. I thought it was an interesting question. I thought that the Thrive acquisition certainly underlined the fact that things can be very expensive. But do you see IPOs and rising valuations sort of eating into the ability of larger companies like Boston being able to acquire and grow?
Good question. And I think it depends on the end markets in the space, to be honest. There are certain end markets where interest is very high. Genomics, liquid biopsy, single cell analysis. I think those markets, it's going to be pretty hard to find assets in that space. But the broader medical device industry, I don't think that should be an issue unless you have a compelling reason on why your technology is a step function change. It's going to be hard because you need to build a sales force. I mean, how many new companies can build a sales force in the midst of a pandemic? And how many providers will be open to meeting and learning about new products, right? I think there are some structural challenges which are unique to a pandemic environment. So companies will still find assets, but I think you have to be a little bit more perhaps selective.
Great. And final quick question. I know you need to go. How are you listening to the calls this week? How are companies feeling about the rest of the year as COVID begins to surge again? Sounds like they're not anticipating another Q2. I don't know if it's wishful thinking or if they're actually in a better position than they were 6 months ago.
I mean, the numbers certainly would suggest we're in a much better spot. I think first themselves they've gotten better at managing the pandemic. Some hospitals have gone as far as segregating COVID versus non-COVID hospitals. So I think overall, the system is in a much better shape to handle the second wave. But that said, I think there's still so many unknowns, right? And I think we're all playing the guessing game. Things could take an ugly turn. We did see this in Europe, particularly the UK, FTSE, where the second wave was had a quite dramatic impact. With some numbers for a few of these companies, seeing down 30-40% revenues, which is, we're talking about April kind of declines for some of these companies. So that's the fear. As we get into December, is that, something that that we could face here in the US, I think is a question. I think the base case is you should, if nothing else, 3Q trends should sustain in a Q4. Perhaps some modest improvement should be a base case assumption.
Great thoughts, and I do appreciate you taking a few minutes this busy week to join us on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me over, Tom.
All right. Well, it was great to visit with Vijay Kumar, to have him on the podcast first time, and we'll definitely have him back. Now is our opportunity to tell our beloved podcast listeners how they can find us on the social media channels. Danielle Kirsch, why don't you go first?
I can be found on Twitter at Danielle_Kirsch, KIRSH, no C, and LinkedIn at my same name.
Did you say no C because I spelled your name wrong once? Is that why?
No C because everyone spells my name wrong.
And Sean, I always pronounce your name wrong, so why don't you just say it and give your social media information?
You can find me on Twitter at Sean Hooley, SeanWhooley, WTWH. That's my Twitter handle. And then Sean Hooley, as again, WHOOLEY on LinkedIn as well. Welcome all followers and connections.
And Chris Newmarker, if you wouldn't mind providing Nancy Crotty's information.
Sure, absolutely. You can find Nancy on LinkedIn, Nancy Crotty, CROTTI, and she's also on Twitter at @NCrotty. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well, Chris Newmarker, just like a Newmarker, and my Twitter handle's @Newmarker. So always happy to make new connections and find out more cool things going on in our industry.
And I am Tom Salemi on LinkedIn, and you can find me on Twitter at Medtech Tom. All right, well, that's a wrap. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on this Wicked Large podcast. And it's been great to have the team involved, and we'll definitely look forward to having you all back. And thanks to our DeviceTalks Weekly podcast listeners for joining us. As I said, we hope to have the principals of the Intuitive Surgical's new venture fund on next week. And another surprise, another senior executive from one of the largest medtechs in the world. So make sure you subscribe. Make sure you, if you do subscribe, you do get this podcast delivered directly to your listening device. You don't have to wait for us to post it on MassDevice or on our social media channels. So why not be first? But you can also find it on MassDevice. And of course, we'll be posting it on LinkedIn if folks like yourself share it. So please do share this podcast. Tell your friends and colleagues. We'd love to have more people listening. And of course, again, tune in next week. We'll have another great episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast for you.
See you soon. Don't turn into a werewolf.